killer storms didn't stop at state lines. They didn't discriminate based on skin color, creed, political party, or age. Among the more than 90 victims that we know of at this moment, the eldest was 86 years old. The youngest, sadly, was a tiny baby, just 5 months old. Even as people in my state of Illinois grieve for victims in our state, we also mourn for and with all those who died and are suffering in nearby states: Arkansas, Tennessee, Mississippi, Missouri, and especially our neighbor to the south, Kentucky. Senator McConnell has spoken, and we've all seen reports of the staggering destruction in Mayfield, Kentucky, and other communities. I want to say a few words about the destruction that was wreaked in my own state, and also about the tremendous outpouring of compassion and community. The National Weather Service tells us more than 30 tornadoes tore through 6 states last Friday night. The most destructive may go down as the longest continuous tornado in the history of the United States. That tornado appears to have remained on the ground for 4 hours, traveling 290 miles across 4 states, pulverizing everything in its path. From Kentucky, there are reports of objects being lifted 30,000 feet in the air by the force of the tornado. Treasured family photos were found 100 miles away. Sadly, at least 80 people have lost their lives in Kentucky. In Illinois, we have also suffered staggering losses. 4 tornadoes tore across our state between 7:30 and 10 o'clock last Friday. The greatest devastation was in Edwardsville, Illinois, in Madison County, where a powerful tornado with winds up to 155 miles an hour peeled the roof off a massive Amazon distribution facility about 9 o'clock. I know that facility, I've been there. Massive concrete walls 11 inches thick and 40 feet high caved in, trapping employees who were working to fill Christmas and holiday orders. Fire and rescue crews from at least 20 communities rushed to the scene. More than 45 workers managed to escape from that mountain of rubble, but 6 workers died when the warehouse collapsed. The oldest was 62, the youngest was 26. 30 more workers were hurt, one still hospitalized with critical injuries. I know I speak for millions of Americans when I say that our hearts go out to all those who perished in Friday's tornadoes and to those they left behind. I thank President Biden for responding quickly. Yesterday, our governor, J.B. Pritzker, requested emergency declaration, and of course, we join him in that request. The president issued the emergency order just a few hours after that request. This assistance will help our state immediately, but there's more to do. Thanks to the Red Cross and so many volunteers, local residents, and communities across Illinois for pitching in to help the victims. Supplementing that fine work are volunteers who have come to help in any way they can. It was ironic that last week I had a coffee for a man named Jose Andres. Jose Andres is well known by many across the country for his extraordinary efforts to feed hungry people. Last Tuesday, he spoke to us and a few members of our caucus about his nonprofit organization, the World Central Kitchen. They've come to the rescue of people in need in Puerto Rico and Haiti and all across the United States. Today, World Central Kitchen is on the ground in Mayville, Kentucky, where the tornado struck last Friday, providing hot food to the victims. It's a time when America, a divided nation, actually sees our nation coming together. The tornadoes didn't distinguish between red states and blue states, between Trump supporters and Biden supporters. And it's my great hope that the Senate will also put aside its politics for a few moments and stand together to help the victims. On a related matter, Mr. President, while we cannot say that last week's killer tornadoes were directly related to climate change, there's no doubt among scientists that climate change is making the world's weather patterns more volatile and destructive. How many times in the past year have members of the Senate come to the floor to respond to a once-in-a-century heat wave, a once-in-a-century storm that has hit their home state? I'll just say for tornadoes, you can't be a kid growing up in the Midwest as I was and not know about tornadoes. How many times in the middle of the summer we were rousted out of our bed as the sirens went off and Mom would take us down to the basement, a safe place until the storm would blow over. That was a summer phenomenon. I just have to remind you, we just went through a December tornado in that same area, unheard of in years gone by. Over the summer, the Pacific Northwest burned in the worst heat wave on record. Droughts in western states, polar vortex knocking Texas power grid offline. Each of these deadly and disastrous weather events are related to the next. And it's a fair warning to all of us that what's happening to the climate in the United States is happening around the world. Just yesterday, scientists warned that a glacier the size of Florida is at risk of splitting apart in the next few years, causing catastrophic rise in sea levels that could threaten millions of people living in coastal areas. When we talk about Build Back Better, the reconciliation bill, and that part of the bill that is focused on environmental resilience, being ready to protect ourselves and to bounce back if necessary when extreme weather hits, it's the topic in this morning's newspaper, and it'll be in tomorrow's as well. We ought to be coming together and finally put aside our political differences and realize that climate change is a threat to us now and an even greater threat to our children and grandchildren. Last week, I received a letter from one of the small business owners in our area, Dr. Dane Glick. A few years ago, he started a company called Straight Up Solar, developing solar energy systems for homes and businesses in my state of Illinois and Missouri. He wrote and he said, "Solar is a job creator. The long-term tax incentives in the Build Back Better Act for solar, storage, and domestic manufacturing will put us on a path to decarbonize the electric grid, reach the President's 2035 clean energy target, and create hundreds of thousands of quality career opportunities in every community." Today, Dr. Glick employs 100 people throughout the Midwest, but with investments in the Build Back Better Act, the reconciliation bill, he's going to expand operation and hire more workers. Let's give him the incentive that he needs. I heard the senator from Kentucky, the Republican leader, come to the floor, and once again, he is critical of this whole effort. I wish he would stop and reflect on the fact that our incentives to move in the right direction on the environment really are an important part of the conversation we should have after the devastation last Friday in his state and mine and across the Midwest. It's time to transform our environmental crisis into an economic catalyst. Mr. President, I would also like to put a statement in the record at a separate location with unanimous consent.
Without objection.
Mr. President, turns out it's an anniversary, just this month. You see, in 1921, 100 years ago, a Canadian scientist named Frederick Banting discovered insulin. He sold the patent for this discovery to the University of Toronto for $1. He declared that this life-saving drug didn't belong to him, quote, "It belongs to the world." He wasn't the only unselfish scientist I can remember. I remember as a kid our fear of polio, and along came Dr. Jonas Salk, bless his soul, and discovered the discovered the vaccine that we needed to protect ourselves. There was no great political debate. People weren't threatening lawsuits. My mom and dad said, "Line up and roll up your sleeve, kid. We're going to do what needs to be done to protect you from polio." Dr. Jonas Salk gave away the patent to that drug as well. It was a different era, perhaps, when insulin was discovered or the polio vaccine. But we should reflect on the state of play today of that drug insulin. 100 years later, there are 8.4 million diabetics in the United States who rely on insulin. They have to pay, many of them, an exorbitant amount of money for a drug that supposedly belongs to them, according to its discoverer. As the cost of insulin has risen, average list prices increased 40% for insulin between 2014 and 2018. I'm quoting from an article in today's USA Today by Katie Waddell. Patients and their families are shelling out hundreds of dollars, even if they have good insurance. Ron Regalado is the father of a teen with type 1 diabetes. Do you know what he calls the insulin pricing system? Legal extortion. This article tells a story of what he went through. He'd never heard of a pharmacy benefit manager before 2 years ago, but it was 2 years ago that his son, Matt, then 14 years old, was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And Mr. Regalado got a crash course in insulin pricing in America today. His first trip to the pharmacy when his son was released from the hospital came with a $1,000 price tag for all the testing supplies and insulin he'd never purchased before. The next month, when all he had to do was buy more insulin, the price was still north of $400 after insurance. This single dad of two said he thought he had good insurance until he found himself having to redo his entire household budget to afford the insulin to keep his son alive. I thought, how do people do this, he said. He's a resident of Tacoma, Nebraska. He started making calls to his insurance company, the pharmacy, and doctors, trying to figure out a way to lower his out-of-pocket expenses for the insulin that his son needed to survive. Then he called his congressman. Congressman Jeff Fortenberry, a Republican of Nebraska, said in July, quote, "The harsh reality is that the cost of insulin is artificially high and ever escalating." He's introduced a bill at capping the prices. They call it Matt's Act, after Mr. Regalado's son. Matt's Act would make insulin prices fair for everyone by capping the price at $60 a vial and $20 a vial for those on insurance. What a dramatic difference that would make for the Regalado family in Nebraska. Instead of $400, $20. The reason I raise that is the provision in law that we are trying to enact is in the same bill that the Republican leader just came to the floor and told us America cannot afford. The tax increases in that bill, and there will be tax increases, will only apply to people making over $400,000 a year. And yet the Republican leader comes to the floor and talks about this terrible idea of raising taxes. So let's step back and measure the difference here. Should Mr. Regalado, a single dad, father of two, with a 14-year-old son who needs insulin to live, be paying $400 a month or $20 a month for the insulin, the life-saving insulin? And to make up the difference, is it unfair to ask someone making over $400,000 a year to pay more in taxes? You be the judge. I don't even think it's a close call. What we need to do is to get down to business. I don't know that there'll be a single Republican voting to support this effort to reduce the cost of insulin for 8 million diabetics. That's just the way politics works in this chamber, I'm afraid. But I do hope that the 8 million families who have a diabetic son or daughter, father or mother, will step up and speak up in the next few days, because we have a chance to bring this measure to the floor this year, a measure which will affect many different areas of the law, but specifically the cost of insulin for American families. If those 8 million families will stand up and speak up and say to members of the United States Senate, enough, you've negotiated enough, close the deal, do something that will be helpful to our families, just maybe that can make a difference. Maybe the endless negotiations that have gone on for month after month after month will finally come to an end. Now's the time to get it done. We have work to do in the Senate and clearing the bill for final passage, but I think we're on the track to get that done. What we need to have is a groundswell of support from across America. When you take a look at the other provisions in the bill, helping working families to pay for daycare, for goodness sakes, there's hardly a family around, unless they're very wealthy, that isn't concerned about the cost and quality of daycare available. We have a provision in this bill, the same bill that Senator McConnell spoke against just a few minutes ago, to help families pay for daycare. Is it important to these families? Well, it's important to my family. I visited with my granddaughter over the weekend, and I'm sure there are many people in my situation with grandchildren who look at those kids and realize they should be in a safe, nurturing, affordable environment every single day, so mom and dad don't have to think twice. Is it important to have a provision in the law which said we're going to provide home health care services to elderly members of our family or disabled members of our family? I'll tell you this, the elderly folks that I speak to, the senior citizens, want to stay independent as long as possible, and they want to stay home as long as possible. If we can help them stay home and be independent, why wouldn't we do it? If it means a tax increase for people making over $400,000 a year, so be it. Sign me up for that increase. That's the sort of thing I think we do in America. Those who are well off pay a little bit more in taxes, so those who are struggling can get a helping hand. So when the Republicans come to the floor and tell us how terrible this bill is, we'll tell it to 8 million families in America with someone who needs insulin to stay alive each month. Tell it to the millions of families with kids who want to make sure they have peace of mind that these kids are being taken care of while they go to work. Tell them to the families with elderly parents or people who are disabled in their household who need a helping hand to be able to stay home and have quality health care. All of these things are addressed in this bill. It is important that we pass it, and I hope we do it soon, but we need to hear from America to create the momentum to get that job done. Mr. President, I ask that this entire article from the USA Today on insulin be placed in the record.
Without objection.
I yield the floor.